You only exist because your mother deceived me. Those were the first words I heard from the man who technically brought me into this world. It wasn't in an emotional reunion. It wasn't in an apology. It was in a cold hospital room, smelling of disinfectant and regret too late. But this is not a story about reconciliation. This is a story about open wounds with silence, about a girl left behind, and about the exact moment when fate turned the tables. My name is Helena, and until I was 28, I carried silence as my surname. I grew up with the absence of my father as a constant ghost. My mother, strong, hardworking, too tired to hate, raised me alone and said that the important thing was that I knew who I was. But there were holes in my identity that not even her love could fill. I tried not to think about him. I told myself that he wasn't missed. I was lying, because every rejected child spends their life trying to prove that they are worthy of being accepted, even by the people who rejected them. When I was a teenager, I found a torn photo in an old envelope in the back of my closet. It showed a man with a distant, charming look on his face smiling beside my mother, young, radiant, hopeful. On the back of the photo was written in pen, "The best lie I ever told, he's staying." My mother never explained it to me. She just said that he had moved on, married another rich woman, and that I was part of a chapter he pretended didn't exist. That's when I decided, if he ignored me, I would beat him to the one thing he valued: prestige. I studied like an obsessive. I went hungry some nights to pay for my prep course. I got a scholarship to a renowned college. I entered the corporate world discreetly, but with a thirst that only the invisible know, and I worked my way up. From low-paid internships to becoming a strategy consultant, specialized in turning around bankrupt family businesses. Ironically, that was what he would come to need, but he didn't know it yet. He had no idea that the woman behind the report analyzing his company, bankrupt, in debt, and despised in the industry, was the same daughter he had publicly disowned when I was still a baby. One of the partners called me aside. He said, "Helena, this is a delicate case. The owner of the company is influential, but he is in trouble. We need someone cool and objective." "Leave it to me," I replied. "I know people like him by heart." The name in the dossier made me feel sick. Henrique Alvarez de Andrade, my father. The man who signed the birth certificate in anger. The same man who told his friends that he had been set up, as if I were a sentence. Life has a cruel sense of humor, because at that moment, he needed me. And I, after so much time trying to forget, saw between the lines of the opportunity, the beginning of revenge. But it wouldn't be impulsive revenge. It would be something he would never expect. My presence. Because nothing hurts someone like him more than having to ask for help from someone he dehumanized. Do you believe that there are pains that arise even before words? I believe. Because even before I understood what rejection was, I already felt his absence like an invisible wound. I don't remember his face at home, but I remember the questions at school. "And your father? Did he die? You don't have it." Each of these questions was a small, discreet knife that taught me to smile and answer as if nothing were hurting me. But the truth is that he not only existed, he lived just a few blocks away, in a house surrounded by high walls, with 2 legitimate children, and a wife who appeared in the society columns. My mother tried to hide her tiredness. She worked as a substitute teacher during the day and sewed at night. She said she didn't need him for anything, but sometimes I could hear her crying softly in the kitchen. It was on one of those nights that, at the age of 12, I understood that our story had been erased from his life as a mistake. She had received a subpoena. It wasn't a pension. It was a formal request for legal leave. He wanted to legally ensure that his name would never be linked to mine. "To protect my image and the integrity of my family," his lawyer said on letterhead. And further down, in cold, dry words, the minor in question was the result of a brief relationship, the continuity of which was ended by consensus while still pregnant. The applicant does not recognize any emotional bond or responsibility. My mother tore up the paper, but not before letting me read it. From then on, I didn't hate him. I fell silent. I grew up in silence, accumulating impeccable report cards and discreet awards. Every time a teacher praised my writing, it was as if I said internally, "See, Dad, I'm good." Every time my mother cried in secret, I would whisper to myself, "One day, he'll regret it." Years later, during college, I had to do field work with local business people. One of my colleagues suggested visiting Alvarez and Andrade Transport, one of the most traditional companies in the city. And guess who it belonged to? Yes, it was his. We were greeted by one of the managers, and as we were leaving, he appeared, impeccable, arrogant, with the same look in his eyes from the old photo I found from my childhood. My heart froze. I didn't know whether to smile or run. He didn't recognize me. He looked straight at me, but his eyes passed through as if they were through glass. "Who is that girl?" he asked, curious. "Helena. Economics student at UFR. Nice name." And he smiled. "It must make your parents proud." He said that. I swallowed the blood-tasting tears. It was at that moment that I realized he was never my father. He was just the man who decided I shouldn't exist. But I existed, and one day he would feel it. Years passed, and then the day of the report arrived. His company was on the verge of bankruptcy. The numbers were tragic, and the tax evasion scandal was about to break. The only person with access to his holdings' confidential data? Me. And when I saw the digital signature at the bottom of the restructuring contract, confirming that he agreed to the consultancy, he signed my name, Helena de Souza Andrade. He accepted my help, not knowing that he was signing a pact with the past he had tried to bury. I could save him. But I wasn't going. I was going to let it sink in. Slowly, gracefully, believing until the end that it was just another ordinary crisis. But when he found out who I was, it would be too late. Time has a cruel way of bringing the arrogant to their knees. My father's company, once a symbol of strength in the transportation industry, had become a pathetic shadow of its former self. The fleet was in disrepair. Old contracts were being terminated one by one, and new ones were nothing more than empty promises. Rumors of corruption and money laundering began to circulate quietly among competitors. But he kept pretending it was all part of a strategic adjustment. The funny thing is that the deeper he sank, the more he clung to his pose. He continued to go to corporate dinners, trying to maintain the same vain smile, but the eyes around him no longer shone as before. Society was beginning to smell weakness, and nothing is more cruel to a powerful man than the false smiles that replace genuine flattery. It was in this context that he appeared, for the first time in years, at the headquarters of the company, hired to carry out the restructuring. At reception, he asked to speak to the person responsible for the recovery plan. I came down from the executive floor. I wore low heels, tied my hair up, and dressed soberly. The kind of clothes that don't scream presence, but command respect. He didn't recognize me. "Helena?" he said, frowning. "Your name is not unfamiliar to me." "It must be your imagination." I smiled. "Shall we go to the meeting room?" During the presentation, he interrupted constantly. He questioned data, doubted projections, and tried to impose authority. It was desperation disguised as control. At the end of the meeting, he fell silent. He took a deep breath and looked out the window. "What do you honestly think?" "I think the empire you built is bleeding. And if you don't accept the changes, you'll die suffocated by your own pride." He sighed. "You remind me of someone. A woman I knew a long time ago. Rough but soft in the eyes." "Your first wife?" I ventured coldly. "No. It was a brief storm in my life. It was a mistake." The word rang dry in the air. Error. He had just referred to my mother, to the woman who worked herself to death to raise me, to the woman who never asked for a single penny, but who was treated like a threat for having the audacity to bring me into the world. My anger exploded inside like a silent earthquake. But on the outside, I smiled, and he just said, "Everyone makes mistakes. Some are more costly than others." He did not realize the threat embedded. In the days that followed, I took control of the plan. Every meeting was a lesson in emotional restraint. Every sentence he said was a reminder of who he was, and who I had become in spite of him. I started making small strategic decisions that seemed good, but that I knew would gradually expose the company. He trusted me. He exposed himself to me. And little did he know that with every word he was giving me the tools to dismantle the sandcastle he had built based on lies and abandonment. Meanwhile, the emotional impact on me was overwhelming. I started having insomnia again. I cried alone in the bathroom at work. Sometimes I found myself staring into space, remembering the day he walked past me and called me a nice name. But the pain turned into motivation, because for the first time, I was in control. It wasn't about money. It wasn't about empty revenge. It was about being seen, to be heard, to be recognized, even if it was at the last second, when the ground opened up beneath his feet. And that moment was coming. The day I stopped being a rejected daughter and became a breakdown strategist was the day I stopped feeling sorry for myself. Till then, there was pain, there was hurt, there was contained anger. But in that moment, when I looked at the man who had erased me from existence and saw his hands shaking as he signed a recovery proposal that I had written myself, something was different. There was clarity. My plan didn't come about in a rush. It had been taking shape silently, as if it was just waiting for me to grow up enough to execute it. And now I had all the pieces in hand. The first move was to isolate. I made a point of personally reviewing all contracts, reevaluating suppliers, and restructuring the company's fiscal council. In doing so, I eliminated his old allies, trusted men who knew about his schemes and protected him like a shield. Under the pretext of cutting costs and modernizing processes, I replaced old advisors with new names, all connected to me, directly or indirectly. Ethical, technical experts who were loyal to the truth. And most importantly, they were unaware of my connection to him. Henrique Alvarez began to feel cornered. He still didn't know why, but he could feel something was off. That the daughter of a woman he'd erased from history was now dominating every meeting as if she owned the company. And I was, owner of the script. The second step was to reconstruct the financial history. During internal analyses, I noticed several irregularities in previous tax reports: embezzlement, phantom contracts, payments made to shell companies, all with a signature that appeared with disturbing frequency: HAA, Henrique Alvarez de Andrade. A powerful name, which now became proof. Proof of fraud. Proof of corruption. Proof that he lied, cheated, and evaded taxes. I could have thrown it all into the media at once. But no, I wanted him to bow first. My third step was the most symbolic, purposeful. I scheduled a conference with investors and advisors. It was important to demonstrate transparency and a new strategic positioning. And for the presentation, I used an interactive panel with a company timeline, growth comparisons, and critical moments. In the middle of the chart, I inserted a discrete image, a birth certificate. Mine. In the eyes of others, it was just a visual metaphor, a symbol of the company's rebirth. In his eyes, it was a punch in the gut. During the conference, he stood motionless, hands clenched, sweating, trembling slightly. He acknowledged the certificate, the mother's name, the date, the place, and the strongest part, his surname there, in the bottom right corner, as the author of a life he tried to erase. He didn't say anything. I couldn't. For the first time in his life, Henrique Alvarez de Andrade was confronted with the truth laid bare for everyone to see. And there was nothing he could do. At the end of the conference, he approached, his voice low, his eyes hard. "What are you doing?" "Recovering what's left." I replied. "Did you know who I was from the beginning?" "I always knew. But you were the one who never wanted to know who I was." Silence. "Is this personal?" "It's justice." He swallowed hard. For the first time, the man who called me a mistake was afraid. And that was just the beginning. Revenge is a cold dish, they say. But I've learned it's more than that. It's a dish put together with details, with layers, and with time. While my father was still trying to understand who I was on that board, I already had all the moves lined up. The company was vulnerable. His name was even more so, and I knew exactly where the skeletons he buried were. After all, half of his accounting was in my hands. Behind the scenes, I called for an internal audit under the pretext of cleaning up the traces of past mismanagement. The audit would be carried out by an outsourced team, but I was the project coordinator. And on the team was Marcelo, a college friend who now worked at the IRS. Marcelo didn't know about my connection with Henrique, but he trusted me. When I handed him a dossier of inconsistencies, he reacted with raised eyebrows. "If all this is proven, it will result in jail time." "I just want the truth, Marcelo." "What if the truth is too ugly? Then it needs to be said out loud." Meanwhile, at the company, Henrique began to show signs of instability. He called emergency meetings, yelled at managers, asked for duplicate reports. I knew something was brewing, but I couldn't prove it. I, on the other hand, maintained my posture. In meetings with shareholders, he spoke confidently, showed numbers, and showed projections. Everything was meticulously balanced to make it clear that the crisis was the responsibility of the former management, his, and that only my technical guidance could save the empire from ruin. And little by little, the shareholders began to look at me with more respect than they did at him. His image, so carefully constructed over decades, was crumbling. Silently. A defining moment was when the main bank refused a new line of credit he requested. "Sorry, Henrique," said the manager. "The risk analysis was unfavorable." He turned pale. "That's ridiculous. I've always had unlimited credit in this house. The new data sent by your consultant indicates high risk. The priority now is stability." Your consultant. He swallowed hard. At home, at night, I cried. Yes, I cried. Because no matter how rational everything was, no matter how much the plan was working, it was impossible not to feel the pain of destroying the man who, deep down, I still wanted to have loved me. But then I remembered the words he said to my mother at the recognition hearing. "I never wanted this child. She was a one-night mistake." And then, the guilt disappeared. It gave way to lucidity. He was not a father. He was an executioner disguised as a businessman. And now he was getting a taste of invisibility, the same one he gave me for almost 3 decades. One more move. I instructed the marketing team to remove his image from all institutional campaigns. New image, I explained with a smile. In place of his face, campaigns appeared featuring young entrepreneurs, women in leadership positions, stories of overcoming. The company began to be seen as modern, ethical, renewed. And his name? It disappeared. It stopped being active and became passive and toxic. But I wasn't done yet. The final piece was about to be fitted together, and it would come from the same source he used to try to erase me. To her. The first time he really felt it was when the newspaper called. It wasn't a headline yet. It was a fact check. But all it took was the reporter's call and his phone fell out of his hand. "We have documents that indicate irregular movements in the name of Alvarez and Andrade between 2012 and 2018. Would you like to comment?" The news hadn't broken yet, but the panic on his face told me everything. He knew. He knew the castle had begun to crumble from within. And the bomb didn't come from outside. It came from someone who knew exactly where to aim. At meetings, he was unrecognizable. The man who was once acclaimed for his firm voice now trembled when he tried to argue. He interrupted presentations, contradicted himself, and blamed others. But the saddest and most satisfying thing was seeing the looks on his face. No one respected him anymore. They just tolerated it, as if he was already dead but hadn't fallen yet. And me? He sat at the table, watching with the calm of someone who had waited his whole life for that theater. The day that marked the turning point was the general shareholders' meeting. I prepared everything: slides, graphs, projections, and a confidential dossier delivered only to the main investors, with evidence of tax evasion, illicit enrichment, and fraud in contracts signed by him. Henrique, suspicious, tried to stop the presentation. "This is an attack," he shouted. "You want to destroy my name?" "It's not an attack," I replied. "It's the truth that you've hidden for years, and that will now be confronted with transparency." It was then that he got up from his chair and pointed his finger in my direction. You set this all up, from the beginning." Silence. Everyone looked. "Who do you think you are? You're nothing. You're a low-class consultant, an opportunist." My breath trembled. My heart beat like a drum in my chest. And I answered, firmly, with blood in my eyes and the soul of the 12-year-old girl he tried to erase. "I'm your daughter, Henry. And you will finally listen to me." The entire room was in shock. He turned pale. He sat as if the weight of the world had settled on him. He tried to laugh. He tried to deny it. But it was too late. I showed the certificate. I showed the records of the court case. I even showed him the old photo of my mother, the one he once called the brief storm. "You tried to erase me. You tried to pretend I never existed. But I grew up. And now I am the woman who will decide what happens to what is left of your story." He cried. Yes. The man who said he never shed a tear for anyone cried. He asked to talk in private. He said he didn't know, that he was pressured, that he was young, immature, lost. But I saw the truth in his eyes. He always knew. He just chose to hide behind cowardice. "What do you want from me?" he asked, his voice breaking. "Money? Recognition? Forgiveness?" I looked deep into his eyes. "I don't want anything. I just want you to feel what I've felt for almost 30 years. Be ignored, ridiculed, forgotten, and I'm giving you the gift you never gave me, the truth. The auditorium was absolutely silent. After the revelation, after I said I was the daughter of Henrique Alvarez de Andrade in front of the entire board, shareholders and main directors, no one moved anymore. Time has stopped. The air became dense, charged, as if the entire past had materialized between the walls of the room. He, sitting with his hands clasped, stared at the floor as if looking for a way out. But there was no way out. Not this time. For years, I began, my voice firm, this company has operated under an empire of lies. For years, this man evaded taxes, cheated on contracts, and oppressed those around him. And most of all, for years, he pretended a child didn't exist, just because the truth got in the way of his name. Some murmured, others swallowed hard. I held up the printed documents. These are formal proofs of the corruption carried out by Henrique. They were validated by an independent audit, and as coordinator of the recovery plan and representative of the new tax management, I forwarded all the material to the public prosecutor's office and the Federal Revenue Service. He stood up suddenly. You can't do this. This is a setup. It's personal. You're destroying me because you hate me. Yes, I replied, staring back at him. I hated you for a long time. But this, I pointed to the papers, is not hate. It is justice. He staggered a little. Someone tried to hold him back, but he pushed it away with his hand. The once feared man, the giant of business meetings, was now an old man surrounded by evidence, regret, and witnesses. I continued. I could have done all this without ever revealing myself, but I wanted you to know. I wanted you to see with your own eyes that the girl you disowned became the woman who dictated the end of your reign. You are cruel, he said, almost whispering. No. You were cruel when you sent that document to my mother saying that you didn't recognize me. It was cruel when he looked me in the eyes years later and didn't see me. I am only a consequence of what you built, and today you reap. At that moment, the chairman of the board stood up. Mr. Henrique Alvarez de Andrade, based on the evidence presented, the presidency proposes your immediate dismissal from the position of executive director of Alvarez and Andrade Transportes. Silence. The man who ruled and misruled for 3 decades was unanimously removed from office. There, in front of everyone. He lowered his head. He did not protest. He did not ask for mercy. Because deep down, I knew I deserved every bit of that fall. As he signed the release papers, without looking up, I watched him. For the first time, there was no arrogance. There was no irony. There was only emptiness. As we left the building, the press was already waiting. A scoop. A scandal. An important name about to be formally denounced. But when they asked me if I was just a consultant or something more, I just said, I am his daughter. But he chose not to be my father. Now he will have to deal with it. In front of the entire country. And I left. Without crying. Without shouting. Without looking back. Because my revenge was complete. The fall of a man like Henrique Alvarez de Andrade is never silent. It comes with headlines, scandals, and looks of disgust from those who once gave him a standing ovation. In the days following the meeting, newspapers printed in bold letters, Transportation tycoon ousted after fraud allegations. Hidden daughter is revealed. A ironia? What shocked the public most was not the corruption, nor the false contracts. It was the existence of a daughter he had hidden for decades, and who now emerged as the centerpiece of his downfall. Social media exploded. Comments ranged from indignation, support, and of course, morbid curiosity. Influencers started sharing videos of my speech during the assembly. The phrases I said became headlines. I am his daughter, and he chose not to be my father. It became motivational video audio. It became a cut on TikTok. It became true, indisputable, raw, viral. But for him, that was a sentence. The Federal Revenue Service filed a request to freeze assets. The public prosecutor's office opened a formal investigation, and the former allies disappeared like smoke. Business partners terminated contracts. His name became a risk. The reputation? Irretrievable. I got an email from him, short. You got what you wanted. I hope you are at peace. Peace? Maybe peace was too much. But there was, yes, a feeling, dense, strange, bittersweet, of the end of a cycle. As he faced the courts, newspapers began reporting personal details: the betrayals of the official wife, the exorbitant expenses on lovers, hidden records of labor processes. The name Henrique Alvarez has become synonymous with decadence. He tried to avoid arrest with protective measures and agreements. But the public humiliation, there was no way around that. His wife left him. The legitimate children sued him for breach of trust and attempted concealment of assets. The assets were auctioned off, little by little. The empire crumbled like wet paper. And me? I was called for TV shows. I refused to participate in the majority. But I agreed to give just one interview on national television. The reporter asked me, "What do you feel when you see your father in this state?" My answer was simple, and perhaps the most sincere of my life. He was never my father. He was just the man who taught me, through his absence, to never depend on anyone to build my value. Do you regret it? No. I just gave him back what I received. Silence. The interview was aired. The next day I received an unexpected message. An unknown number. "You won, really. All I can do is apologize. Even though I know they don't change anything." It was his. I read, I deleted it, and I followed. Because the forgiveness he wanted was not about repentance. It was about guilt relief. And the guilt was all he had now. It's been 2 years since I last looked into Henry's eyes. I don't know where he is today. If he is alive, if he was arrested, if he still cries in front of his own ruins. Perhaps he hid on some distant farm, fleeing the spotlight he once loved so much. Maybe you finally understood that you don't erase a story just because it confronts you. But me? I continue. I continued to be invited to lectures, committees, success stories. The woman who revealed a corporate scandal, who stood up against her own father, who became a symbol of strength. But more than all that, I rebuilt myself from the inside. I spent months in therapy. I had to learn that revenge is satisfying, yes, but it doesn't fulfill me. It is like fire. It lights up at first, but consumes everything if you don't know when to stop. And I knew. Today, I live in a modest apartment, but I bought it with my own money. I have a bookshelf full of books that my mother encouraged me to read when everything seemed impossible. And on top of that shelf, there is a photo. Me and her, smiling. No makeup, no filter, just 2 women who face the world with courage. My mother is gone now. Cancer took her 6 months after Henry's fall, but she left in peace. She saw my victory. She saw me go up on stage at the assembly. She held my hand in the hallway before the national interview. And he whispered, "Now he knows. But you always knew." And I knew, yes. I always knew I didn't need him to be whole. I just needed to look at myself, at my story, and finally say, I exist, and that is enough. The world sees me today as an example, but for me, I am just the consequence of a simple choice. Do not accept being erased. If I've learned anything from all of this, it's that the worst pain doesn't come from rejection. It comes from the silence we swallow when we believe we need to deserve love. I didn't have to earn it. I needed to overcome it. And even if justice came late, she came. Not like a punch, not like a scandal, but as a cold, clean, devastating answer. Father, you have denied me my whole life. And when you needed me, my response was the same silence you have given me for decades. But mine was irreversible. Today, I move forward. I no longer carry hate, just memory, and the certainty that my existence in itself was the most overwhelming revenge of all.